It was supposed to be a historic moment. World leaders, journalists, cameras, all gathered under one roof at the 2025 Global Leadership Trade Summit in Geneva. The studio buzzed with light and chatter, but something felt off. There was tension, and everyone could feel it. Captain Ibrahim Traoré arrived quietly, his posture upright, his uniform spotless, his expression calm, but unreadable. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but people turned when he entered. He carried presence. A moderator smiled and introduced the panel. Among them, U.S. President Donald Trump sat with arms crossed, already shaking his head. Minutes into the talk, Trump interrupted a speaker to declare, "I've said it before and I'll say it again. Countries like Burkina Faso don't exactly bring much to the table." The room froze. Laughter came from a few in the back. Others looked down, avoiding eye contact. Traoré blinked slowly. He didn't speak. Not yet. But behind that silence, something began to burn, and when the cameras zoomed in, they caught it. The look in his eyes that said, "You've gone too far." The moderator shifted awkwardly. "Let's stay respectful," she said nervously, trying to move on. But Trump leaned forward and said louder, "I'm just being honest. You don't fix failing countries by pretending they matter." That was it. Captain Ibrahim Traoré slowly removed the earpiece, translating the English audio. He stood, not fast, not aggressively, just stood. The air tightened. "I came here to speak of partnership," Traoré said, his voice even. "Not to be measured like I'm at an auction." Cameras locked on him. Phones went up. Live streams exploded. Trump smirked. "Well, if you can't take a little truth," Traoré cut in softly. "Truth is that my people dig gold you wear on your wrist, grow cocoa you eat in your sweets. Yet we are called nothing." Gasps. A journalist dropped his pen. "No one here is beneath anyone," Traoré added. "But some speak like they've forgotten that history has eyes." For a moment, even Trump was quiet. But then, with a shrug, he muttered, "Here we go, another victim speech." That's when the shift happened, not in Traoré's voice, but in his eyes. The storm was coming. Burkinabe viewers watching at home were already tearing up. Social media was catching fire. Hashtags like "Respect Africa" and "I Stand with Traoré" began trending. But inside the studio, Trump still didn't get it. He laughed, that cold, dismissive chuckle. Then, just loud enough for his mic to catch it, he said, "Some leaders look like they just came from a jungle parade." It was whispered, but microphones hear everything. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even Trump's allies looked shocked. Traoré didn't raise his voice. Instead, he stepped back from the table, looked directly into the camera, and spoke not just to the room, but to the world. To every child watching this, your skin, your village, your story, it is not shameful. It is sacred. Then, he looked at Trump for the final time. "I will not sit here and be degraded for applause. If this is the price of being heard, I'll walk out and let silence speak louder than your insults." And he turned and walked out. The moderator froze. The audience rose. Even Trump looked shaken. Outside, reporters chased Traoré, begging for a statement. But all he said was, "The world heard enough. Let it decide who stood for truth." As Traoré walked out of the studio, cameras scrambled. One lens caught the quiet fury in his eyes. Another zoomed in on the veins in his clenched hand. Social media didn't wait. The clip hit X, formerly Twitter, and within minutes, it was everywhere. "African leader walks out on Trump, says enough." A young girl in Burkina Faso whispered to her mother, "Did he just stand up for us?" Her mom nodded, wiping tears away. In New York, a university professor paused her lecture to replay the footage. In Ghana, A school paused for a moment of silence. In Washington, the summit hall remained frozen. The moderator looked panicked. Trump sat smug, but it didn't last long. Phones in the audience buzzed nonstop. Then came the hashtags. Traoré walked. I stand with Ibrahim. Africa deserves respect inside the green room. Traoré stood quietly. His advisors asked if he wanted to return. No, he said softly. I came with peace, but if peace is mocked, silence speaks louder. He sat. His phone lit up. A message from a child read, "Thank you for standing. You made me feel seen." Meanwhile, inside the summit, Trump smirked and leaned toward the microphone. Well, I guess we struck a nerve, he said, chuckling. Maybe he couldn't take the heat. Laughter from a few in the back, but most of the room remained still, unsure whether to clap or cringe. A CNN reporter whispered, "Did he really just say that?" Trump continued, "I've always said we can't be soft. We're here to speak facts, not feelings." Then came the twist. He added, "If someone walks out because they're too sensitive, maybe they weren't ready for real leadership." Boom. That was the clip. But instead of hurting Traoré's image, it backfired. Hard. That night, major anchors called Trump's remarks tone-deaf and deeply offensive. Former diplomats from Kenya, France, and even Canada condemned him. Even a retired U.S. senator tweeted, "Leadership isn't loud, it's dignified." Traoré showed what real strength looks like. In Burkina Faso, people filled the streets, not in protest, but in pride. Music played, flags waved. They didn't see a walkout. They saw a stand-up. Backstage, Traoré's aide said, "The world is shifting. You've just become a symbol." Traoré didn't smile. He just said, "I never wanted to be. I only wanted us to be heard." The next morning, the world woke up different. Outside the UN headquarters in New York, a silent crowd gathered. No yelling, no speeches, just signs. One caught everyone's attention. Held by a 9-year-old African boy in a school uniform, the cardboard read, "Ibrahim Traoré, thank you for standing for me." The photo went viral. News outlets picked it up in every language. TikToks flooded timelines with reactions, people crying, people speechless. In the studio, journalists asked each other, "Why is this moment hitting so hard?" Because it was more than politics. It was about dignity, about respect, about the years Africa was spoken about, not with. A clip of Traoré's speech, "Your village is sacred," played on repeat with violins under it. People began stitching the video with emotional messages. Celebrities, scholars, even athletes joined in. Back in Burkina Faso, elders gathered under a mango tree. One said, "We've waited a long time for a voice like his." Another replied, "It didn't roar, it whispered, and the world heard it." And far away, Captain Traoré sat alone in a quiet room, watching the boy with the sign. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in days, he let a tear fall. 2 days later, in the quiet heat of a Sahel village, a boy named Malik handed his grandfather a folded note. He had written it the night before, using an old pencil and lined paper. His grandfather, a retired teacher, read the letter aloud under a neem tree as neighbors listened. "Dear Captain Traoré, I don't know what you said in that room, but my mom cried when she saw you walk out. She told me that no one ever stood up for us on TV before. She said you carried us in your silence. So thank you. Please don't stop walking for us. Malik, age 12. The old man folded the letter with shaky hands. "This isn't just a message," he whispered. "It's a memory." The video of him reading it was uploaded to YouTube. It spread like wildfire. Even major news outlets picked it up, calling it the letter that moved a continent. Traoré received a translated copy in Geneva. He didn't speak when he finished reading it. He just closed his eyes. and placed the paper over his heart. Inside the summit, Trump gave another press conference. "I didn't say anything racist," he insisted. "People are just too sensitive these days." But even his allies looked uncomfortable. A few walked out silently, others looked at the floor. Meanwhile, a journalist from South Africa stood up and asked, "Mr. Trump, do you believe dignity is only for the West?" Trump waved her off. The room grew tense. Across the world, people weren't waiting for answers anymore. They were listening to someone else now. Clips of Traoré's quiet voice saying, "Your village is sacred," played again and again. No shouting, no anger, just truth. Calm, measured, devastating. One Ghanaian poet posted, "Sometimes revolutions begin not with screams, but with silence." That night, a protest formed in front of the U.S. Embassy in Paris, not with chants, but with signs that read, "Silence is a sentence." We heard Traoré. "We are still standing." Traoré remained out of sight. But people could feel him. And across schools in Africa, teachers played his speech in class. Children, for once, saw someone who looked like them, being honored, not humiliated. A South African journalist, Thandi Mandela, daughter of a close friend of Nelson Mandela, watched the summit clip over and over. Then she posted a video to X, her eyes swollen with tears. "When I saw Captain Traoré walk out, it reminded me of my father. The calm, the strength, the silence that roared. He didn't walk out in weakness. He walked out for us. He walked out carrying history on his back." Her voice broke. "And to the world that still sees Africa as a joke, you witnessed our dignity. Don't pretend you didn't." The video was only 55 seconds long, but in just 3 hours, it had 4.7 million views. News networks played it. Celebrities quoted it. Even global politicians responded. Some tried to distance themselves from Trump's remarks. Others tried to change the subject. But none could stop what had begun. Traoré hadn't said a word since leaving that stage, and yet his silence was shaping a global conversation. Back in his hotel room, Traoré sat alone. The message from Thandi played on the screen in front of him. This time he whispered out loud, "I didn't walk for cameras. I walked for the children watching." 3 days after Traoré's walkout, an unaired backstage clip was leaked by a summit staffer. It showed what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. In the video, Trump was heard laughing and saying, "If they're that sensitive, maybe they should stay in the jungle." The words weren't supposed to reach the public, but they did. The backlash was immediate. CNN broke the story first, then BBC, then Al Jazeera. Protests erupted in Dakar, Lagos, Paris, and New York. Youth filled the streets holding cardboard signs reading, "We are not invisible. Dignity has no color." In Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, thousands marched peacefully in honor of Traoré. But in the U.S., some tried to defend Trump, claiming it was just a joke. A Senegalese student in Washington cried during an interview, "We're not laughing. We're bleeding inside." Captain Traoré still hadn't spoken, but the pressure was mounting. His silence was no longer just powerful, it was deafening. By now, African leaders who once kept quiet began to rise. The president of Namibia publicly said, "If one of us is insulted, we are all insulted." Kenya's deputy foreign minister withdrew from a pending U.S. trade round. Even the African Union held a special session, live-streamed globally. But the moment that shook the world came from an unexpected source. U.S. diplomat, who had served in West Africa, broke down during a CNN interview. Her voice trembled. "I've worked in Burkina Faso. I know the kind of quiet strength that man carries. When he walked out, it wasn't just one leader leaving a room. It was the ghost of every ancestor rising to follow him." The anchor was silent. Tears welled up in the diplomat's eyes as she whispered, "We lost something that day, but Africa found something." That clip became the most shared video of the week. Still, Traoré said nothing. But inside his hotel, his team was planning something. Something big. Not a press conference, not a speech, but a moment. A moment the world would never forget. The UN had planned a follow-up meeting in New York to repair the damage. Every chair in the main hall had a nameplate. At the front row, United States, United Kingdom, France, and beside them, Burkina Faso. But the seat for Burkina Faso was empty. Just one white rose rested on it. No one understood why, until a letter was read aloud by the Secretary General. It was written by Captain Traoré himself. I do not sit in rooms where my people are shamed. I do not trade handshakes for humiliation. I do not return unless dignity walks through the door before me. This chair is not empty. It is full of history, of struggle, of memory, and until respect is restored, it will remain exactly as you see it. Captain Ibrahim Traoré. The room was silent. One delegate from Brazil stood up, then South Africa, then Ghana, then Chile. One by one, leaders rose in respect. The camera panned slowly across the hall, and all that could be heard was applause. Long, slow, emotional. Even in absence, Traoré had spoken louder than ever. In a live interview, a young African journalist named Zainab was asked about the summit. She hesitated, then simply said, "I didn't cry when he walked out. I cried when he stayed silent." The host leaned forward, confused. "Why?" Zainab wiped a tear and explained, "Because when someone powerful stays quiet after being insulted, it means the insult hit deep. It hurt." That single moment went viral across Africa. And then something unexpected happened. Traoré broke his silence. He appeared, not in a political interview, but in a short, quiet video filmed with a phone, sitting on a rooftop in Ouagadougou at sunset. "I didn't walk out because I was angry," he said softly. "I walked out because I saw my mother's eyes in the room, and she deserved more." His voice cracked. "I walked out for every African child who has ever been made to feel small in a room full of cameras." He paused, and then, just before the screen faded to black, one single tear rolled down his cheek. The internet didn't just explode, it wept. The morning after Traoré's rooftop video went live, something happened no one expected. A call came in. It wasn't just from an aide. It was from the U.S. Vice President. Traoré didn't answer immediately. He let it ring. His advisor looked at him surprised. "You're not going to take it?" Traoré sat still, then said calmly, "Respect delayed is not always respect." But after 5 minutes of silence, he picked up. The Vice President of the United States apologized. Sincerely. "I can't undo what was said," he admitted, "but I can acknowledge what was lost, and what must be rebuilt." Traoré listened quietly. When he finally spoke, his words were slow, deliberate. "The apology is not for me. It's for every name that was never spoken. For every child who never got to speak back." That line echoed across the world. News channels replayed it over and over. Even American school children were taught it in class. And that night, something unexpected happened. The lights of the Eiffel Tower lit up in the colors of Burkina Faso's flag. Paris. Crying. Applauding. The whole world was watching. A few weeks passed. The fire hadn't faded. Instead, it grew brighter. Across Africa, young artists painted murals of Traoré. In Ethiopia, students staged plays reenacting his speech. In South Korea, a choir sang "Rise Africa" in his honor. Then came the news. The United Nations had invited Captain Ibrahim Traoré to give the keynote address at their next General Assembly in New York. Not as a panelist, not as a guest. As the voice of global dignity, the world held its breath. Would he accept? His team gathered. Some warned him not to return. Others said the moment had passed. Traoré looked at them and simply said, "I will speak. But not because I want the spotlight. I will speak because silence has done its job. Now, it's time for the world to listen." Word spread instantly. People booked flights to New York. Journalists camped outside the UN. And in every home across Burkina Faso, families waited. Some prayed. Some wept. Because they knew this wouldn't just be a speech. It would be history. The morning of the United Nations Assembly, the streets of New York were packed. Not with protesters, not with tourists, but with people holding signs in dozens of languages. "We stand with Traoré. History is watching. Let Africa speak." Inside, the UN General Assembly was filled to capacity. Every seat was taken. Security was tight. Journalists were silent. Then, the doors opened. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stepped into the hall, not flanked by soldiers, but by children from different countries. A Syrian girl, a boy from Ghana, a child from Haiti, a boy from Palestine, a girl from Ukraine. Each one walked with him, hand in hand. The entire room stood up. No applause, just silence. The kind of silence you can feel. He reached the podium, adjusted the mic, and began. "I am not here to accuse. I am not here to entertain. I am here because the world has a wound, and pretending not to feel it is not healing it." People leaned forward. Even those who once mocked him now listened. Captain Traoré's voice was calm, steady, but each word cut deep. He didn't yell, he didn't insult, he didn't even mention Trump by name. Instead, he spoke of dignity, of forgotten villages, of cocoa farmers, of grandmothers with sun-wrinkled hands, of African children who only see their leaders on TV when there's war. "We are more than headlines," he said. "We are not your poverty projects. We are your partners in humanity." He paused, letting the room breathe. Then he told a story of his own father, who never went to school but taught him one sentence he never forgot. "Son, the day they mock your silence, speak, not with fire, but with truth." Traoré looked up. "To the world I say this. Africa will no longer whisper in the room it helped build. And if we must walk out again, we will walk out with our heads higher than before." Then came his final sentence. He looked at the children behind him and said, "If I do not speak for them, then I was never a leader, just a title." The entire room stood, applauding, crying. The world had heard. The speech played across every screen on earth, in homes, schools, churches, mosques, smartphones. In a remote village in Mali, an elder wiped tears from his eyes and whispered, "We are no longer invisible." In Brooklyn, a teacher paused her class and asked her students, "What did you feel watching him speak?" One child replied, "I felt proud, and I'm not even African." Even world leaders who once stayed silent now released statements of support. The clip of Traoré's final sentence became the most replayed political moment of the year. Within 48 hours, over 2 billion people had watched it. But what mattered most was what happened afterward. Burkina Faso saw a record rise in school enrollment. Young Africans created movements titled, "Walk Like Traoré," "Speak with Dignity," and on that same UN stage where he once walked out, now portraits of African heroes hung proudly, not in the shadows, but on the walls, where the world could see. If this story moved your heart, if it made you cry, if it made you feel proud of who you are, please don't just scroll. Like this video. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that speak truth to power. Comment below. What part of this story hit you the hardest? Let's fill this comment section with love, unity, and dignity. Because when we stand with each other, the world listens. Stand with Traoré. Africa deserves respect. Let voices rise.